Labour Minister Thulasingesi says the inclusion of unions and civil society groups in this year's Africa Growth and Opportunity Forum will help ensure that human and worker rights are protected. The three-day event is discussing, among other things, the renewal of Agoa, which allows African countries duty-free access to the United States, amongst other things, of course, but primarily centered on trade. I'm joined by Professor Siphamandla Zondi, who's with the University of Johannesburg's Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation. Prof. Zondi, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight. So it seems that a lot of the noise that we had in the first part of the year around this forum, how it would go about, it looks like a lot of that has died down. They've been able to not only hold the forum, but really get down to business. So as things stand, two things for you that are topping the agenda for this forum.
Oh, yeah, of course. Trade negotiations, trade arrangements are always about balancing power. About power, because it's about actually securing a country's pivotal national interest. And you would understand why there were contestations about who you trade with and how does trade with them advance your interest. It's supposed to be also about how you find shared interest and shared perspective. But with big power, sometimes it's about imposing your interest on others and then sharing it back, basically sharing with yourself through others, your own interests. So it also, in the trade negotiations, sharpens internal contradictions within the countries, so that debate very strongly what then is our national interest in this trade. How do you advance it? We can advance it better than you. So that contestation can also make the whole process of negotiation and renegotiation complex as we see it right now.
Prof. Zondi, do you believe that the continent is going into this forum quite clear, at least in terms of the continental objectives? And the reason why I'm grouping the continent is that there was a lot said at the BRICS summit earlier on this year around how Africa really needed to start speaking in one voice when it came to matters of trade, and that this would be sort of the attitude that was taken coming off and building from the momentum coming out of BRICS. Do you think that that is the case?
Yes, definitely. It's part of the dynamics that are at play right now. The Agoa Treaty is meant to enable the United States to trade with the continent in a coordinated way rather than individualized trade agreements. And therefore, it hopes to advance its interests across all of Africa. In recent times, that is done in competition with others that have come into Africa looking for economic opportunities, China, South Korea, Japan, Russia, and a few others that have come onto the continent to compete for these opportunities. And therefore, what is said at BRICS, or what is shared in the Shanghai cooperation mechanism, or what is shared in another platform, will have a bearing on this. What BRICS said about the African agreements was that they will be looking for agreements that advance development outcomes, rather than mere agreements that are about income and spending, but looking for agreements that would enable industrialization, enable development and all that. So now the United States is also hard pressed to think about how does it structure now its agreement as it revises, such that it also competes with others by making sure that improvement in the quality of lives of people, investment in education, in health, and other areas of human capacity are factored into the agreement, so that it doesn't look like its agreement is purely economistic, whereas the agreements of Africa has with others are developmental and comprehensive in nature. It is very aware of this, and you see it in in the briefings to the U.S. Congress that they are very aware of the need to respond to this, because if they are going to maintain a stable relationship with Africa, they have to address Africa's key concern, and Africa's key concern related to questions of development as well as peace, but development a lot more.
There has been a view expressed, Professor Zondi, going into this forum that perhaps when we look at least what it has provided historically, there hasn't been full advantage taken of the opportunity of what Agoa was supposed to be. And as you're saying, the world is very different to when this idea was first introduced by the then U.S. President, I believe it was Bill Clinton. So looking at where things are today, what do you think are going to be some of the issues that are put on the table by countries like South Africa alongside the rest of sub-Saharan Africa when it comes to this agreement, so that the future of Agoa can yield better and more effective results for both ends of the parties?
Yes, Africa is hard-pressed to make sure that whatever agreements are done, they are all in line with Agenda 2063, which is the aspirations the continent has for its development by the year 2063. And these relate to questions of health, of education, issues of human capability, but they also relate to economic development, not just trade and investment, but trade and investment that enables the continent to become a center of production, a center of marketing, of manufacturing, a center of industrial production, so that the continent does not remain a consumer of goods and exporter of raw material. Now, this is what the continent will be pushing for in these agreements, that as you revise them, you strengthen the developmental outcomes of it, developmental dimensions of these agreements. You ensure that they help Africa win itself from the dependency culture by which it simply exports products and import manufactured goods. If an agreement makes provision for supporting local manufacturing, local production, insourcing, and other issues, then that agreement might be seen to be in the interest of Africa in the sense that it advances Agenda 2063 goal. But it is not just going to be the Americans who need to give that to Africa, but it is the Africans who are going to have to argue that very strongly, that in this day and age, you need trade and investment whose outcome must be the improved quality of lives of people, not just the number of goods received and number of goods sent. It must, all of that exchange must lead to the improvement in the quality of life of people, improvement in the economic capacity of that country, improvement in the governmental capacity to deliver the goods for the people. Otherwise, there is no point in the whole trade thing.
Professor Zondi, I want us to wrap it up looking at the caveat, of course, that forms part of the conditions of Agoa, and that's really what is happening domestically in countries and the extent to which they're honoring and protecting ideals of human rights. And already this year we've seen some countries that are likely to lose out from the benefits of Agoa. I'm talking here about Uganda due to their anti-homosexuality laws. You have the likes of Niger, Gabon, that might also stand to lose out because of coups that have taken place in those countries. Is that a unique aspect of perhaps these kind of agreements, particularly with the U.S., that we don't necessarily see when we're talking, maybe when we're dealing with other countries, South-to-South countries, and I'm talking here the likes of China, Russia, India that you've mentioned?
Yeah, what is unique is two related factors that come out in the selection of those countries that are now not going to be invited to Agoa, is the fact that the United States feels that it has a duty to promote a particular kind of democracy and therefore tie everything that it does with others to whether countries follow that narrow path of a particular kind of democracy, and not just democracy, but a particular type that they prefer. The second one is that the US has no qualms about imposing on their partner who must represent the other side. So in the current one, for example, Zimbabwe is not invited, and a few other countries, Sudan and others. It is the US that decides which African country must come in to these discussions. It does the same with the US-Africa Summit. It's just one of those residues of the old neo-colonial arrangements, where the United States relates with Africa not as equal partners, but it is related with Africa as a kind of a paternalistic partner that thinks knows what is in the best interest of Africa, and thinks it knows who must be on the African side, that it must negotiate. So it's almost like negotiate with someone and they say, please don't bring your young son, don't bring your elder son, only bring the middle son and the other person. So I want to negotiate with you, but I tell you who you must bring to our negotiation, and I call that equal partnership.
All right. Professor Siphamandla Zondi is with the University of Johannesburg's Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation.